We did a show with Julian Lennon. He hadn't performed in 10 years, and he did a benefit here, and we were his backup band. And so we're hanging out, and I said, I don't know how it's going to make you feel, but my son is named Lennon. He goes, I love that. That's great.
Turn your speakers up to 11 because it's time for Too Much Effing Perspective, the podcast that asks musicians and entertainers to relive their most Spinal Tap moments when nothing goes right and everything gets kind of weird. I'm your host, Alan Keller, comedy writer in LA and former lead singer of the least heralded Chicago band, The Falling Walendas.
And I'm your co-host, Alex Hoffman, former tour manager for Radiohead and former lead singer of the least heralded Milwaukee band, The Vainglorious.
Our guest today is the founder of a band that sold over 10 million records and has had 7 number 1 hits, Collective Soul's Ed Roland.
We talked to Ed about the time he thought that Kenny Rogers was just some guy dressed up as Kenny Rogers, how he got punked by Aerosmith's Steven Tyler while trying to impress a girl, and what freaky thing happened the night Lisa Marie Presley died while the band was recording their new album at Elvis's Palm Springs home.
So without further ado, let's go to the TMEP show!
It really puts perspective on things, doesn't it?
Not too much. There's too much effing perspective now.
Alex, as you know, I've been a Wisconsin sports fan ever since I could read, and don't say, oh, that recent?
You beat me to it.
Yeah, I know you. And just to brag about my lineage, my godfather, Marv Fishman, brought the Bucks NBA franchise to Milwaukee back in 1968. And I went to tons of games when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was the star of the team and the Bucks won their first championship in 1971. In fact, my prized possession in the whole world was a signed picture that read to Allen, Lou Alcindor. And Lou Alcindor was Kareem's birth name until he changed it in like 1970, 71.
Why do you say was about that photo? Did you sell it in a garage sale or something?
I should have, because I would have came out ahead there. Instead, I set it in a frame when I moved to LA in a very prominent space by my window in the house. And hey, little did I know those rays from a California sun will make an autograph with a Flair pen disappear completely.
Oh, no.
Totally. Goodbye. Gone.
I'm really sorry to hear that, old chum.
All right, let's just change the subject before I cry. I want to also say I'm a huge fan of the Milwaukee Brewers, and their founder and the eventual baseball commissioner, Bud Selig, was actually at my sister's wedding. And back in 1975, I got to take a picture with Hammerin' Hank Aaron.
Cool.
It was such a great moment in my life. And that autograph picture is also gone because one day when my daughter had a party at our house, the package that was in disappeared. So I don't have that either.
Damn.
But let's go to the third major sports team in Wisconsin, because you and I both share this allegiance. We're both rabid Green Bay Packer fans, and now more than ever since they got rid of QAnon Rodgers.
QAnon. I actually lived in Green Bay twice as a kid and have been to the storied Lambeau Field many times. I even bribed my way into a game in high school by slipping a gate attendant a $5 bill.
Get out of here. Really?
I did.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
Things were a little more lax back in those days.
Well, I envy that you had such proximity to such a great venue. I've only been to Lambeau probably 3 or 4 times in my life. Anyway, musicians who love sports are a smaller subset than you'd think. I think it's probably because many musicians are geeks and they didn't get along well with jocks in high school, and that turned them off to sports forever. That's my theory.
That sounds plausible.
And, you know, every once in a while, I'll find a rocker who's also a jocker, and it leads to an unbreakable bond. Like our guest today, Collective Soul's Ed Roland, who said that if you want to get his band to perform on the cheap, just ask them to sing the national anthem at a sporting event.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. I mean, you are definitely a rocker jocker, Alan. And Ed too, and he sang the Star Spangled Banner before a Packers game last year, which we were delighted to learn.
Another thing I envy. And Ed is from Atlanta, And it just so happens Atlanta and Milwaukee have a very odd sports connectivity. Atlanta has pilfered 2 Milwaukee sports franchises. The Atlanta Hawks in the NBA were actually once the Milwaukee Hawks, and the Atlanta Braves baseball team was actually originally the Milwaukee Braves.
And, interestingly, Ed knew the entire history. That was cool.
He did. He knew so much about the history. He knew that the Milwaukee Braves were actually, before that, the Boston Braves, which I really was impressed with. Anyway, we had a really great effing conversation with him. And I think part of it was the rapport musicians who like sports have with each other. It's just a natural.
Yeah, it was a fun conversation. So why don't we share it with our listeners? And in that spirit, listeners, if you like the stories you're hearing on Too Much Effing Perspective, please tell 3 friends about our show. They can find TMEP on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever they listen.
And if those 3 friends just happen to be Giannis Antetokounmpo, Paul Molitor, and Sterling Sharp, all the better.
Invite them over for dinner. We'll be there.
Yes.
So now let's get to our chat with Ed Roland. But first, a short break.
And now, a musician who met his wife when she came over to his apartment to pick up football tickets. Collective Soul's Ed Roland.
So, Ed, thank you for joining us on Too Much Effing Perspective. And I'd like to kick us off by sharing one of the greatest Spinal Tap moments that I ever witnessed that had your band Collective Soul really right in the middle of it.
Oh, boy.
It was 1996. It was at the Fox Theater in Atlanta, which is your hometown. And the show featured 4 bands, all of which had hits on the radio at that time. There was you guys, Everclear, the Toadies, and the band that I was tour managing, the Bodines, who had their song Closer to Free, which was the theme song for the TV show Party of 5. And Collective Soul and Bodines were the best known bands on the bill. Mm-hmm. And as we were preparing for the show, the Bodines insisted that they wanted to do their full 90-minute set as part of the performance that night. And you guys basically said, yeah, no problem. We'll open for you. And so, again, this was a hometown gig. Your fans had packed out the place. Collective Soul played this cracker 60-minute set that was just hit after hit after hit. I knew the words of every song as you guys were playing. And at the end of the set, at least 100 fans, I think at your invitation, Ed, came onto the stage and were dancing and singing along. You were up on the drum riser singing. Your guitar player, Ross, was over on this offstage, basically the guitar techs area, still playing. I mean, you guys did not miss a beat as this mayhem was happening on stage. So it was really just awesome. You blew the roof off the place, right? Then the Bodines went on, began to play. At some point, the lights flashed on the crowd and the theater was half empty. And it was just like a gut punch, right? So needless to say, in the dressing room after the show, the ride back to the hotel, things were really, really quiet.
We are huge Bodines fans. I apologize for that. I did not set out to do that.
Well, it's very gracious of you to apologize. I thought it was incredible.
Well,
look, the Bodines, I will say, that never happened again. When it came to playing with peer bands, the Bodines were always happy to play earlier in the set, right? To sort of get that energy early.
We've always been that way too. You get to my age, I'm like, I want to go on early so I can go to bed early.
We had on Brian Ritchie from the Violent Femmes, and Nirvana was opening for them. So what happened was, during the tour, Nirvana got big.
Right.
And so the labels wanted Nirvana to headline, to switch it around. And the Femmes said, all right, that's fine. And Kurt said, no way, man. You're a lot better live. We're not doing that. You guys stay as a headliner. And so they stayed as a headliner until it was impossible.
Right.
But Ed, you were also in one of my personal Spinal Tap moments. I was in a band called the Falling Wallendas. I think it was 95. We flew to Orlando to play the Hard Rock Cafe. Little did we know we were going to be playing at lunch. Not even lunch, like 2, right? 2 p.m. Nobody was there. Nobody was there. Except you guys.
The early bird.
We're the Blue Play special band. Spinal Tap, they opened for the puppet show. We opened for the pancakes. All you can eat. But you guys, for some reason, you were the only people there having lunch. And you listened to our sets. We're so nice. I think you identified the situation we were in. And I think you guys were overly pleasant to us. So I appreciate that.
It took me 12 years before anybody showed up to our shows. around Atlanta, the only people that would show up would be whoever were dating at the time. And the only reason they came because they got free beer.
Yeah.
Trust me, I've been in those where they close the restaurant down 15 minutes, move all the tables, and they set the band up for, and you have no sound check. You have no, it's just roller skating rings. They're pissed off that they have to quit roller skating because you're going to do a show.
We went up to you on that. We played the state fair in Wisconsin. We were told to turn down because we were disturbing the pigs.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Yes. I didn't know pigs were so picky about the music they listen to.
How do you disturb a pig? Because eventually they're going to be slaughtered and we're going to eat them. I don't understand.
Well, pigs were competing though.
Yes, they're competitive
for
pigs.
Blue Ribbons, right?
Yes. And they're hoping that we'd play Black Sabbath pigs, I think.
War pigs, actually. Factually, Alan. I think that's war pigs. War pigs.
Well, okay. Tell us what your favorite scene in Spinal Tap is.
Oh, it's been decades since I've seen it. The guys had it on, I think, not last tour, tour before, because they're like 10 years younger than me, so they weren't a part of it, and they watched it and loved it. I mean, my amp goes to 11. Not 10 equals to 11. 11. To me, if you're a guitar player, that's what you want. And then we always joke with our drummer, he's going to self-implode or self-explode. Like I said, it's been decades, because I watched it so much when it first came out, because it was the first like rock and roll movie. Remember we had that movie Heavy Metal.
Yeah.
The animated film. Yeah.
I'd like to see that again.
I want to see that too, because there's some good songs on there.
And great animation.
Yeah. Very sexual from what I can remember, but I was a teenager then. So I was very sexual.
Was.
Yeah. Everything
was perfect.
Richard Gere looked good in the Gigolo, American Gigolo.
And I like Lou Gossett in Officer and a Gentleman. So.
Okay.
I think it's just being near Richard Gere.
I know.
I just read a story where Richard Gere was trying to explain to his kids what a sex symbol he was.
It's funny you bring that up. I have a funny story. This is Spinal Tap, but it wasn't on stage. I came home to do trick or treat Halloween with my son. This is like 10 years ago. And I go out with the kids in the neighborhood. I'm home, so I want to be the special dad. So I'm taking all the kids trick or treating. And this guy shows up in a golf cart and goes, "Hey, man, my back's hurt. Would you mind watching? My twins are over here." I said, "Sure, man. I'm just going to walk around here." So he kind of just sat there, and the kids all trick or treating. At the end, I shook his hand, said, "I'm Ed." He goes, "I'm Kenny." Went inside the house, and I said, "You're not going to believe this. There's some guy out there dressed like Kenny Rogers for Halloween." And my wife says, "You idiot. That is Kenny Rogers. He's our neighbor." So their sons, they're older now, 18, 19, and they have no clue how big Kenny Rogers was. I'll sit there and go, "Guys, do you realize your father was probably the biggest star for 5 years?"
Right.
Going 3 to 5 years easy. I mean, Kenny was everywhere, TV, movies, music. And they have no idea. It's funny how the kids just don't find it and really don't care.
Well, Bruce Springsteen said his kids can't name a single song because if you brought up any of my music, they would be lost. And he goes, "I'm fine with that. They have their own thing. They don't have to be a fan of their dad." I'm like, wow.
Well, that's true. And he's got one better than me, though. My wife doesn't even care. If you ask her what song I did, and both my boys do not care. And it's kind of cool because I'm dad, and that's what you want to be. You're home, you're home. You just want to be dad. That's it.
Yeah, that's cool.
But I can guarantee you she knows the songs. No way do they not know one of Bruce Springsteen's songs.
Speaking of the songs, again, like I said at that show where I saw you at the Fox, I knew every single song. And so what I heard from another artist, Noel Gallagher from Oasis, saying that there was a time, and I think this was in the 90s, where he felt like every song he wrote would become a hit. He just knew it as he was churning them out. How did you feel about it back then? Did you ever have kind of a comparable sense of things just because things kept rolling?
I think we did at one point. You get caught up in you sell 1 million records and all of a sudden you have this asshole attitude where why didn't we sell 1,000,001? And we cut that out pretty quick because then you're losing perspective of everything. We were blessed to be up there, blessed to be doing what we love to do. Forget the money, forget the sales. And I've never approached songwriting that way. I never sit down and go, "Woo, I got to get that Shine Part 2, Part 3, Part 4, Part 5. It's that's just not part of who we are and what we want to be as a band, especially me as a songwriter. So no, we never got caught up in that, but we never had the hysteria that Oasis had. I'm sure they felt pressure. We never had pressure. Even our own label at the time didn't give a shit what we were doing. I would just show up with the record and they go, "Oh, wow, we made our second quarter." I'm like, what does that mean? I got you now. I got what you mean.
Well, you know what's interesting? I do want to say about that show, and I meant to mention this in the setup, Ahmet Ertegun was there, sitting there at the side of the stage, right? The legendary founder of Atlantic Records. He was, I feel like he was dressed in a white suit.
He was. The last thing I saw as I ran off stage when everybody's coming up there was Ahmet with his cane just slapping the shit out of kids that were coming by. Just came near him. He was, bam.
It's amazing that your memories of that are so clear, because I was going to say, I remember him sitting there with a cane.
Yep.
Wow.
A legend. And he was a funny guy, man. He just didn't give a damn and said what he said, and it was awesome.
Beyond him whacking kids with a cane at that show, is there another Ahmet Ertegun story that you can share?
Yeah, I actually snuck into Atlantic Records when I was 19 years old. You know, this is a different era. Back then, you could sneak in the early, mid-'80s. You do a demo. So I flew to New York with nobody. I just would go to Atlantic Records. All the record companies, I go, yeah, I have a meeting with Ahmet. And they go, who? I said, go ahead, Roland. And I got to tell him the story. And for some reason, I got in there and I sat there with Ahmet, listening to my demo. And he says, you know what? You're not there yet, young man, but you will.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, okay. And it fired me up and I kept doing what I did. And I got to tell him that story, which is kind of cool. I mean, dude, I was 5'6", $120 weight. You know, I was a little kid. Somehow I got into Atlantic Records. I was on cloud 9 at that point. So that's my story with Ahmet.
That's amazing. Wow.
I didn't get any other labels. They were a little more strict, I guess. They were like, that little hillbilly kid, he has no appointment at all.
I wonder how many people got fired at the Atlantic office that you got to sneak in.
Oh, no, I'm sorry about that one, too. I'm just here to apologize for all this today.
No. Oh, my goodness.
It's the apology tour. We're here to make you feel bad.
We're here to relive the glory, because those are the best stories. I mean, we had Nick Hexum from 311 on as a guest, and he similarly would call up labels and just bullshit, right? He'd call one label and said, oh yeah, I was just talking to the president of Capitol Records. They're really interested in us. It's almost like you don't know what you don't know. And so you're not afraid, and you're not afraid. Just go for it.
I would never do that now. Back then, things like that did happen, you know, from Tracy Chapman to Jewel even did it. To have a chance, you got to take a chance. If I'd have been sitting in the basement of the studio, nobody would have heard it. And he gave me constructive criticism, which was great. He could have just thrown me in jail, to be honest with you.
Well, I did a similar thing here when I moved to LA. Well, this is actually before I moved to LA. I moved from music to trying to sell screenplays. And so I came here and I had a screenplay and I was in line and Meg Ryan is next to me. And like right now I'm mortified that I did this, but I wasn't even living here at the time. And I had my script in my hand and I'm like, hey, I got a great script. I gave it to Meg Ryan and I got like the worst sneer from her ever, like just like her lip curled, but she took it. And then I watched her go out to her car just to make sure she didn't just toss it, because then I could reuse it. And she tossed it out at home. She had the decency to wait that long.
I used to do the same thing as a 16-year-old kid. I started making demos at that age. And I go the Omnis, where you saw the big shows in Atlanta.
Right. And professional wrestling.
True. And I would backstage somehow with a cassette. And I'm telling you, what I was writing and recording then it was like a mixture of Leonard Skinner and R2-D2 joined a band. It was horrible. It was just, you know, I was learning. But at least I was trying. So I'll never forget. I gave Sting a copy. I met Sting and I said, hey, man, I got this band, you know. And then I met Rick Ocasek from the Cars.
Wow.
I look back on me as that kid, like, where did that oomph come from? I've lost that oomph. Like, I don't try to sell myself. I guess I don't have to. Like, then it was not desperate, but you was part of just trying to get in the game, I guess.
Again, I don't know how many times that Fox show will come up, but I was in a band at the same time I was tour managing back then, and I gave you my cassette, Ed. I liked what you guys were doing. My sense was that you were producing everything. So I thought this guy would be great to work with. And so first I met Will, your bass player, just in the hallway backstage, and chatted with him a bit. And then after your show, I gave you my cassette and said something stupid like, if I ever won the lottery, I'd love to have you, hire you to produce our stuff. And that may be still in your collection somewhere, that demo, The Vainglorious.
I never throw anything away like that. I keep it. I have a whole closet full of CDs and stuff that people have given me. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And then writing, I'll just listen to them and steal the shit out of it.
Ed actually gave your demo tape to Meg Ryan, which is a perfect
interesting.
closure to this story. You're in a band with your brother. And, there's a scene in Spinal Tap where Nigel says that he and David are closer than brothers because they don't fight. But, there's been a lot of fighting brothers, the Kinks, the Davies brothers, and Oasis, the Gallaghers, and the Everly brothers. They were at each other's throats. So I'm wondering, how was it being in a band with your brother?
It's awesome, to be honest. We're a strange rock and roll band because we kind of all grew up together and same backgrounds, for lack of a better term, small town, parents all together. Not only we like each other, we love each other. Like literally when we started having families, that's when everybody said the wives and everybody were like, you know what, somebody's got to move. Because we'd come home and a day would pass and I'd go, hey guys, what are y'all doing? Y'all want to just hang out? The next thing you know, we're recording and it's late. So my brother moved to San Diego. He went the farthest. Johnny went to Indianapolis, Jesse to Nashville, and then Will just moved farther south. He'll end up in Florida in another decade. He keeps going south and south and south. I mean, we'll get pissy with each other every once in a while, but I've always said we've been that band that's known when to hug each other and when to punch somebody in the face, My brother and I got in a fight one night to see who was going to beat up this guy that was trying to break in our bus. So, yeah, we fight. But the other analogy is like the Kinks. I bring up, Ray and Dave. The rumor was they break guitars on each other. I always tell when Dean's sitting next to him, I'm like, you know what? I just like my guitars too much. I'm not going to break.
I think that's the key to brotherly love, is to buy things that are too valuable to you to actually use as weapons.
It'd be tough to be in a band where you didn't know anybody. You just met them at 21. You don't know the history of how they act and everything. And all of a sudden you're on a submarine going down the road and you have no freedom. You got to get to know these people pretty quick. We knew each other growing up. Like I said, we were small town Georgia and just knew each other. Families knew each other. I think that helped with the longevity of this band. I really do think that's the key.
I want to ask questions about Atlantic Records because you guys had a long stretch with them. And your initial album, Hints, Allegations, and Things Left Unsaid, was released as an independent record, and Shine was on that. Shine broke out. Atlantic then picked it up and wanted to put out that record quickly, right?
Correct.
So it was produced independently, demos, etc. To your ears had demo-esque quality, and you had some reservations about that. And I believe also that the album cover kind of took everybody by surprise too. It was kind of a photo that you guys either hadn't approved or something along those lines.
No, I actually went to an art store and found copyright-free art. So the Mad Hatter was in there. So I went and I literally colored that in and then scanned it.
Oh.
And it wasn't like independently released. It was just, I sent it out to everybody. I was just trying to get a publishing deal, to be honest. I was just trying to get whoever would sign me. Warner Chappell, the big ones. So I would just come up with different ideas for covers and the songs. So it was basically sell it in the trunk of your car type vibe mentality back then.
Thank you for the fact checking, because one of our sources is that fount of all knowledge, Wikipedia, right? And sometimes stuff that the fans contribute is wrong there. But in any case, were there any Spinal Tap moments you remember of that first album coming out on Atlantic, things that took you by surprise?
No, the whole thing took us by surprise. You have to realize Shine took off so fast, so quick, and there wasn't even a band. I called my brother because him and Will and Shane were in a frat band playing at Georgia Tech and Georgia State. And I said, hey, man, Georgia State just asked us to play the Christmas party because Shine's blowing up. I said, can we learn like 3 songs? So we got there, and our first show, I think we played Shine 5 times and 3 other songs that they learned real quick.
That works.
So everything happened so fast. Back then, you toured like crazy. It was no messing around. And we did like 25 shows in 22 days. You do a radio show and then you go do a festival. Like back then, the festivals were really big and there were a lot more of them. That was the big run of how you got exposed. And we were just all over the place. So I'm sure there are many Spinal Tap moments. I just literally that first 2-3 years was just a haze, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Yeah. When you're touring like that, when you just have so many things coming at you, and especially when you have not only one big hit, but then a string of hits.
Well, you probably experienced this being a tour manager. When something Spinal Tap moment happens, you just kind of accept it, get over it, and the next day there's another Spinal Tap moment, and you just got to move forward, especially as a tour manager. You're like, okay, I got to put this fire out or whatever's happening. You don't even have time to think about what happened Monday when it's Friday because there's another one tomorrow.
That's right. And I think that's why Spinal Tap is such a helpful frame of reference in many ways, right? Because it's, as we've found with many of these conversations, it is such a relatable touch point for anybody who has lived through that experience. It's almost like your owner's manual, right? You're not alone in this.
I guarantee you, you could take any band, especially when they're starting out, take any band, spend a month with them, you can make Spinal Tap 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whoever that band is, you'll have Spinal Tap moments where you're like, okay. That happened.
Yeah.
That it's constantly moving, so it's not documented. And some of those, I guess, I might have put in the back of my head because I don't want to remember.
Repressed.
That's it.
Yes, that's why we have a show here. I mean, there's an unlimited amount of stories, and it doesn't matter how big you are or how small you are, you've run across them. It's pretty amazing. I want to get a perspective on a Spinal Tap scene from you because you had a similar experience. You know, they go down to Graceland, right? And they mourn the king at his graveside and sing Heartbreak Hotel. You recorded at Elvis's house and studio in Palm Springs, didn't you?
I did. That's where we were last year.
Did you have any thing from there that gave you chills?
This is a Spinal Tap moment. So I lived for a month in Elvis Presley's bedroom. Sean Grove, our engineer, lived in Priscilla's room, and we set the control room up in Lisa Marie's room. So while we were there, Lisa Marie passed.
Wow.
And the night she passed, her ceiling fell in her bedroom on all our studio gear.
You're kidding.
Get out of here.
It spooked us out a little bit, to be honest with you. We're like, because we're already in Elvis's house. Nobody had been in there since he passed. Not one person had lived a night in there. So all of a sudden, I'm the only man to sleep in Elvis's bedroom, as far as I know.
We'll find out that's not true eventually.
Probably. There was no TikTok back then. He was fine.
That's right.
That's incredible.
Well, you know, my daughter went to Idlewild High School, which is kind of in the mountains by Palm Springs. She went to boarding school there for 2 years. And we were thinking of moving there. And the house that Elvis filmed Kid Galahad in is there. And it was for sale. And it was cheap.
Not anymore, buddy.
This is not that long ago. This is 5-6 years ago, and it was cheap, and not anymore. Absolutely. I was in that house. I was like, I'm just worried about the plumbing. It's such a weird place. It had like 6 bedrooms. It had bar stools in the kitchen. It was really cool, but I didn't pull the trigger. And now you're right. It's $600 a night on Airbnb.
Yeah. With Elvis, when he died, they just stripped it out. Priscilla wanted nothing to do with it. Nobody had been in that house since, I guess, it's 77. And it's the same stove he cooked on, same refrigerator, same toilet, same shower. But we had to stage it. We had to bring furniture in. And so we kind of dressed it up to what we thought Elvis would like at that time. I love Palm Springs. I really do. I love that vibe there. And the band stayed at Burt Lancaster's house. That's how we came up with Here to Eternity, because the big movie they won Academy Awards.
Right.
Well, that's
Totally.
easy. We got the title already. Let's go.
How cool is that?
Let's just state this very explicitly. So Here to Eternity is your new double album that you recorded it at Elvis's house.
Correct.
That's amazing. The fact that you guys are doing a double album got me thinking about some of the classic double albums of all times.
Frampton.
Right.
Well, right. So, I mean, it's like in the 70s, it seems like everybody who had a record collection that I knew had Frampton Comes Alive, Kiss Alive 2.
Kiss Alive.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. You're right. Kiss Alive, not Kiss Alive 2. That came later, but Kiss Alive. Yeah, for sure.
And then Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. Then you had Exile on Main Street, of course, the White Album of the Beatles. And then later in my youth, Bruce Springsteen's The River.
Yeah.
So as a kid, I just grew up, if I ever made it, I was like, I did a double album, man. It's probably not in the top 10 best double albums of all time, but it's definitely in the top 5.
That was interesting math, how that math went.
I think it's awesome. I mean, it's really ballsy move, Ed.
Well, ballsy because we had Elvis's house for a month, and like I came in with 10 songs and the band recorded, and we're old school. We put the drums up and we horseshoe around Johnny, our drummer, show him. It takes an hour to work the arrangements out. And then we do 3, maybe 5 takes. You can hear mistakes if you so choose to hear them, but you shouldn't. You should just listen to the vibe of what that band's presenting to you at that time. And that's where we went. And I mean, they kicked my ass, to be honest with you. When they did the 10, I was like, we still have 3 weeks here to go. So I just chewed them off for 4 days and said, let me see if I can come up with 10 more songs. And I was lucky enough to get them. And we just had fun with it. I mean, come on. If you can't get inspired living in Elvis's house, I mean...
I couldn't get inspired living in McCartney's mouth. I can't believe you just kicked out 10 songs like that. That shames me because I've been trying to get 10 songs for 10 years now.
I don't know. I guess I got struck by lightning as a kid, don't remember, or something. Because we already have a record we want to put out on Record Store Day at Thanksgiving this year. And then we finished another one last year that's more piano-based and orchestration. So we have 2 records already still in the can.
Wow.
Let's debunk a myth here if we can. But is it true that the first 10 songs you had for this double album were supposed to be on your last record as a double album, but you got talked out of doing it?
No, the last 2 records, Blood and Vibrating, we recorded separately, but we thought they fit good because we recorded real quickly, like when I'm bringing the guys. So we had 20 songs, and I was like, let's do a double album. And the management, in their wisdom, they were correct at the time, was like, nobody does double albums anymore. And I was like, I don't care. Just wanted the double album. So we split it up. Blood came out one year, Vibrating came out the next. And then this one, we went in to do a single record and it came out with a double album. And I was like, please let us do a double album. Please. They were like, let's get it out there. Let's go.
Get it out of your system.
I want to talk about your second album because second albums to me are pretty amazing. First of all, your first album was a compilation of demos, right? It wasn't intended to be, but it was.
Correct.
We talked to Dan Wilson from Semisonic.
Yeah.
And, he wrote with Adele and they did a demo for, what was the song?
Someone Like You.
Mm-hmm. And then they recorded it and they said, no, this doesn't have the magic of the demo. And so they went with that. And I remember when I was in Chicago, Veruca Salt, they did a demo of the song Seether, and it was like yours. A radio station heard it, put it on, and next thing you know, it's a bidding war for those guys, right?
Right.
But so again, your first album is a bunch of demos, and my band, The Falling Walendas, our first album was really just my songwriting partner, myself, coming up with these songs, and then putting our band together. Then the second album, though, is the band, right? And that's kind of what you did too. Your second album, unlike most bands, is your first eponymous one. It's just Collective Soul, right?
Why we called it Collective Soul.
So how's the biggest change in terms of the first album to second album? Obviously, you have experiences from having a hit the first album, but you're also a new band that's working together and defining their sound.
Well, I think the first hints is just all over the place with song styles and themes, lyrics, and all of the above. Like I said, I just think we found what we were as a band. And I kind of focused in on what Collective Soul forte was, maybe some guitar riffs, not as folksy. It was more of a rock and roll band. And that just came from playing with each other, and then that inspires me of how I want to write and what I feel is best for this band. Doesn't mean I can't still write some of those songs like was on Hints, but it would have to be interpreted by these guys. And they were interpreting it way different than me just sitting in a room by myself for too long. Like I said, you put the bass down and by the time you got the drums on there, you got to change the bass again because it's not a band. It's like a jigsaw puzzle almost, and it takes longer and it's not as productive, I don't think. But once again, being a preacher's kid, Shine begot all the other songs. So it helped to be where we are.
Yeah.
I have no problem with Hints. It just isn't a true representation of Collective Soul. It just isn't. Truly, Collective Soul is the first one.
It's so interesting because our first album, we wrote the songs without the band, and then the band had to do them, right? But then the second album is us writing for the band, and it's a totally different thing. It's a lot heavier, just like yours.
You learn the personality of the band.
Yes.
Through the guys in the band or girls in the band. You learn the personalities. You go, okay, this is what I feel I can get out of him. When you're writing the song, you literally, I think about it now when I write the song, like Jesse, our lead guitarist, I'm like, oh yeah, this is something he would take home, take care of.
But there's two parts of that. One is sound, right? Like it reminds me of one of my favorite second albums coming off of one of my favorite first albums from artist Elvis Costello. Remember, Elvis's My Aim Is True was a studio band, Clover, right? And then the second album is The Attractions.
The Attractions, right.
And I mean, they're both fantastic albums, but the second album is wow, right? That's a band.
Right. It's funny, back then they allowed artists to find themselves too. I mean, you two would have never gotten a fourth chance in this day and age. Like, they developed, you can hear the first, second, third, fourth, the development, like you're talking about your band. You find that development, you find each other. I mean, you got to think about it. Most of these bands, I'm sure you were like 18, 20, 21.
I wish.
But I'm talking back then when the band, you were just sitting there going, man, I just want to chase girls. You're not focused. And when it comes to serious business, you start really focusing.
Well, that's interesting too, because it reminds me of a thematic change from a first album to the second album. It reminds me of Weezer.
Mm-hmm.
Like Weezer's first album is fantastic pop album, right? The second album, Pinkerton, is really about them becoming rock stars and going through all these trials and tribulations. And it's a really fascinating thing. I can't think of another album where it really is a true representation of the change in the artist's perspective from the first album to the second album.
Right. I agree with that one. That's a good analysis there. Yeah.
Collective Soul was at Woodstock 94 and 99.
Correct.
And 99 was ultimately an infamous undertaking on an air base in upstate New York that really went sideways in a big way. And I kind of wonder, how did Collective Soul fit into the mix?
94 to me was a special, because it's the first time we played. I mean, once again, we played in front of nobody, and all of a sudden we're thrown out in front of tens of thousands of people. But the first band we ran into was Live. They were blowing up right then, and they just pulled up. And we got out, and everybody's excited. We're exchanging pics. Ed and I talk about that all the time. He remembers the same thing, like, wow, how did we get here? How did we get here? 94, there was no egos. Like, we'd run around and we chased King's X down because we were huge fans, and all these bands, there was just no ego. But then 99 came around, and it became who could outdo who, and who could, I don't know, just it lost the vibe of what I thought Woodstock was about, which 94 was celebrating the energy and the spirit of the original Woodstock, which was about peace, love, and happiness. And it was just like music, and that was it. 99 was just so, I hesitate to use the word commercialized, but it truly was commercialized. And then these bands were just doing crazy stuff that had nothing to do with the music or the feel or the vibe of what Woodstock was really about. So that's my 2 cents on it. And love 94.
Yeah. Well, 94, and we've had Brian Ritchie from the Violent Femmes on the show and told us about riding a golf cart with Crosby, Stills, and Nash. And
yeah, everybody was just having fun, man.
Yeah.
99, there's bodyguards and this. I was like, really? I don't know.
And 94 was where Sheryl Crow really broke out, too. I mean, that was a huge catapult for her. So another gig that you've done much more recently that's very important to Alan and me, we are both Wisconsinites originally. We are huge Green Bay Packers fans. And you guys played the Green Bay Packers kickoff weekend last September. So any Spinal Tap moments in Green Bay?
No, we played with STP, which was great.
Oh,
They're
wow.
such cool cats, man. And it was fun to talk about brothers and being in band. You know, I'd go to Rob and then I go, everything cool, man? And he's like, yeah. Because my brother got sick. He wasn't even there for that. And we got to do the national anthem the next day for the game. But
oh, you did?
Yeah, we love doing stuff. We love sports.
Wow.
Suckers for that. You want Collective Soul cheap? Let us sing the national anthem. We're all about that.
That's awesome.
As we wrap things up here, Ed, I want to ask you about opening for one of Boston's greatest bands, Aerosmith. Any Spinal Tap moments touring with Stephen and Joe and the crew?
I do have one. It was the first tour. We finished Woodstock and went straight on tour with Aerosmith. And we were just scared. I mean, literally, we didn't get off the bus. We were just scared. And finally, I met this girl and trying to impress her. So I had my laminate, and we're walking backstage. First time I ever met Stephen. And he goes, I need to see your laminate, right when he walked by me and his voice. And I remember I gave myself a neck burn I was so scared. And he goes, I know who you are. Go!
Oh, that's
Oh,
great.
that's awesome. Yeah.
I mean, I was trying to get this girl in bed and looking like a hillbilly.
Oh boy, that's so funny. And then the next year you went out with Van Halen. That was Van Hagar, right? That was Sammy Hagar and Eddie Van Halen. What about that?
That was one of those special moments in our career because they kind of took us under their wing. Sammy, to this day, we talk every month. Michael,
Oh, that's so nice.
and Eddie was beyond sweet. That was our award for being in music. They were just so kind to us. And literally, like I said, they knew we were naive. And, Eddie would sit side stage as we're working out new songs and he'd do his whistle. He goes, I like that song. I like that song. Like in concert, I'm trying to play in front of 12,000, 18,000 people, and I got Eddie Van Halen saying, I like that song. I'm a little confused right now, people. Eddie's over here.
Wow.
Speaking of Boston, the Cars are my favorite Boston band. I will say that. I love me some
Let
Cars.
me just say something about that.
I do love Aerosmith, but I love the Cars.
The first two Cars albums are so perfect. Like Candy-O to me is such an amazing album. But you brought up three things. You brought up Aerosmith. I'm going to say something controversial. Rocks is better than any Led Zeppelin album. That's what I'm going to say about Aerosmith. And you brought up King's X. Oh my God, no one's going to talk about King's X. Faith, Love, and Hope is such an amazing...
They should talk about King's X.
Yeah.
One of the best bands.
And different, right? It's a really unique blend of like these incredibly...
Like rock gospel, if that makes sense.
Yeah. They have a song called Photograph. Do you know the song Photograph? And it's about him meeting his biological family. And
right.
My wife's adopted, and it just is beautiful. And it gives me chills thinking about it.
They were who we wanted to see at first Woodstock. They were on the same bill. And I'll never forget, we're just following them around. Nobody was there to guide us. We're just backstage, and nobody knew who the hell we were. So finally, I'll never forget, Doug turned around and goes, is there something I can do for you boys? I mean, we're literally 5 hillbillies following him around. We just wanted to say, hey, we don't know how to do that.
You know what I got to say, Ed, that I just have really enjoyed about this conversation is your honesty and transparency about sort of just the joy, the thrill, and the naivete of kind of finding yourselves in this situation that you did in 93, 94, 95, and just having the opportunity to intersect with some of your heroes and not even seemingly knowing enough to try and act cool. And maybe you did try.
There's no cool bone in my body. I am just as God made me. I don't know what that is, but I'm just going to go with it, man. I got no other choice.
But not only that, isn't there something about appreciating the success you have and not thinking it was preordained? I mean, there are so many bands out there, and luck plays such a huge part in this business. And I think the key to staying grounded is to realize that some breaks fell your way, right?
100%. Breaks fall your way. I'm not afraid to say 90% of it's luck. But when that luck happens, you have to be ready to take advantage of that luck. To be prepared, you have to have worked hard at it. Just because you get that luck doesn't mean it's going to sustain. It can happen but to have the sustainability takes hard work. Work harder as we did when we first started. And I don't even know if it works. We just love what we do. Like I said, we're one weird band. We love each other, like each other. Our mantra is family first, and that's how we're going to continue to be.
Yeah, that's great. So where can our fans keep up on what Collective Soul's up to, your tours, the new record, all those things?
I guess anything social media, Collective Soul. I'm not one of those guys. Like you said, here's my set list for this coming tour. It's handwritten, and I work with paper and erasers.
Nice.
So anything that has collectivesoul.com, I guess. I don't know. I don't know.
Fair enough. So thank you for your time. Thanks for your stories. This has really been a lot of fun, Ed.
This is one of the most fun times I've had doing these. They can get linear sometimes. This is fun. Thank y'all so much.
Ed, such a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you.
And thank you, listeners, for joining us for another Spinal Tap Moment swap meet. We're hoping to get Ed back soon for a special Rocker Jocker episode so that he and Alan can go deep into the music and sports rabbit hole. Stay tuned for that. Thanks to Amanda Kagan at ABC Public Relations for helping us to get set up with that. Too Much Effing Perspective is a Milwaukee Talkies original. Our editor is Gretchen Kilby. Our music composer is J.K. Harrison. Please follow us on Instagram at TMEP Show. Visit our website at tmepshow.com to sign up for our mailing list and find our other episodes featuring rock stars, comedians, and entertainment luminaries whose bizarro stories we enjoy and we think you will too. on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen.
Although it would be as great as having armadillos in our trousers, this podcast is not affiliated with This Is Spinal Tap, and no person or entity connected with the film has sponsored or endorsed its content. The podcast is not affiliated, sponsored, or licensed by Authorized Spinal Tap LLC or Century of Progress Productions.
Evergreen Podcast Network.